All right, I'm going to work on the question that's called understanding fractions and decimals. And this goes into the idea that this whole unit is all about understanding what it means to look at a piece of something. We've been talking about fractional pieces, decimal pieces, percents, ratios, all different ways of thinking about parts or pieces of something and comparing them to each other. So these questions are kind of about thinking, what does it mean to have a fraction or a decimal or a mixed number? What does it mean? How can we talk about the parts that make that up? So the example or the questions that they give to practice with are, how many sixths in 12 and 2/3? So the question might be like this: how many sixths in 12 and 2/3? So what I'm really thinking about is, how many of these pieces are in here? So if I think about 12 and 2/3, I'm going to start with the whole numbers there. And if I just think about one whole that's broken into sixths, it would look like this, right? I'd have 1/6, another sixth. I'd have a bunch of these sixths together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This would be 6, 6, which is the same as one whole. So in one whole number, if I divided it into sixths, there would be a total of 6 sixths in there. So I have 6 in each one. I have 12 of these. So that means there's 6 times 12. 6 times 12. That would equal 72. So just in the whole number, I have 72 sixths. But I have this additional piece there that's 2/3. So I want to know how many sixths are in 2/3. Well, let's see if I can make this into 6. That will make it easier for me to tell. So 2/3 equals how many 6? 3 times 2 is 6. 2 times 2 is 4. 2/3 is the same as 4 sixths. So if I want to know how many sixths are in 4 sixths, it would be 4. So I have 72 sixths plus 4 sixths. That equals 76 sixths. So I think that's my answer, 76 sixths. If I wanted to, I could also do a mixed number. So this is 12 and 2/3. I could go 3 times 12 is 36, 37, 38. This would be 38 thirds. And if I wanted to know how many sixths that would be, I would say, well, I know 3 times 2 is 6. And if I did the same thing to the top, I would have 76 sixths. So either way, there are 76 sixths in 12 and 2/3. All right. The next one says, how many fifths in 3.3, or 3 3/10? So this one's a bit more challenging in that I have a fraction and a decimal, and I'm trying to compare how many of these fractional pieces are in a decimal. So what I would do here probably is try to make this into a decimal so that they're both decimals, or make this into a fraction so they're both fractions. I'm going to kind of solve it both ways. So I'm going to start by making this into a fraction. So 3.3, that would be 3 3/10. So I don't know how many fifths are in 3 3/10. So I'm going to start again with this whole number, and I know that if I had a whole number that I was making into fifths, it would look something like this. I would have 1/5, 1/5, 1/5, 1/5, 1/5. 5 fifths would be the same as one whole. So this is 5. So there's 5 fifths in each of these wholes, and there's 3 of those. So I would say 3 times 5 equals 15. So this part right here is 15 fifths. But then I have this 3/10 left over, and I want to figure out how many fifths are in that. So I could say, well, if I could make this into fifths, that would be easy. How many fifths are in here? Let me think. If I divided this in half, that would equal 5. That would be fifths. And if I divided the top in half, 3 divided by 2, that would be like 1.5 or 1.5. Now that's technically not a real fraction. I can't really have a decimal as part of a fraction. But it helps me see that in 3/10 there are 1.5 fifths. So there's 1/5 plus there's a half of another fifth. So if I added that on, 1.5 up here, 1.5, I would have a total of 16.5 or 16.5 fifths. 16.5. Now again, I said you could do it another way. You could make this into a decimal and then figure out how many of those are in here. So 1/5 is the same as 2/10. 5 times 2 is 10. 1 times 2 is 2. 2/10 is written like that. So another way I could think of this question is, how many of these 2/10 are there in here? So again, if I think about this, 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, 0.8, 1.0, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these makes one whole. It's kind of like 5 20 cents make $1. So this would be 5, and I have a total, that's in just one, and I have a total of 3. So again, 5 times 3 is going to be 15 of these 0.2s, right? That would take care of this. And then I have this 3/10 left over, which looks like this. And I want to know how many of these 0.2s are in here. Well, if I took 1 away, I could get at least 1 out of here. And then I would have 0.1 left. That's kind of half of one of these. So again, I would have 1.5. That's what I would get. I would have 1.5 of these 0.2s. So again, my answer would be 16.5 or 16.5 fifths. That's going to be my answer for that one. Again, that's pretty challenging, especially that one. I don't think there's any on here that are going to have that are going to end up being a half of a fraction or something like that. But that's how we would solve these. That's kind of the thinking behind it. So hopefully that's helpful.